My name is Maggie Hollister. I restore furniture in Charleston. My parents stole every single dollar of the $100,000 Grandma left me and funneled it straight into Tyler's Vanderbilt law degree, without telling me a word. Graduation morning, Mom's voice cut like glass. You're not invited. Closest family only. Minutes later, Tyler barged into my workshop, stared at the priceless antebellum chair I was restoring, and laughed. God, Maggie, look at yourself. Filthy, broke, wasting your pathetic life on other people's old trash. Of course you're not coming. You'd humiliate us all. I'd been quiet for 7 years for one reason. Grandma's warning still burned in my ears. Baby, when you finally speak, the room had better be ready. I picked up the phone. 1 call, 4 minutes. The next morning, my parents stormed my apartment and froze when they saw who was holding the 1998 file, and what they discovered next tore their entire world apart. If you're listening to this from Charleston or anywhere the wisteria is heavy on the porches this month, drop your city in the comments. I want to know who's still up. If a daughter holding her hands quiet for 7 years sounds like someone you've known, stay a while. The first part is slow on purpose. It has to be. The summer I was 11, my grandmother, Grace Hollister, set my hands on a rough plank of walnut in the back of her garage off Trad Street. The board was unfinished, 3 feet long, the color of weak coffee. She told me to close my eyes. Feel which way the tree wanted to grow, baby. The wood remembers. The garage smelled of beeswax and lemon oil and old turpentine. The light came in cold through the east window, a single gray bar across the floorboards. Grandma Grace's hands were already trembling that summer. Parkinson's, though the family wouldn't say the word out loud for another year, but when she laid her palm over mine, the tremor stopped. Her thumb pressed my thumb into the grain. Slow, slower, there. I felt it then, a faint give, like a tide. The walnut had a direction it wanted to be sanded, a direction it remembered from being a tree. I was 11. I didn't have words for what she was showing me. I only knew the garage smelled warm and the floor was cold, and her hand was steady on mine. She straightened. She rubbed wax into the corner of the board with the side of her thumb. I'll teach you something else next summer, Margaret, about paperwork. Not yet. I nodded the way you nod at 11, not understanding. She lived 12 more years. At 22, I finished a 4-year apprenticeship with Master Restorer Daniel Worsham at the Charleston Preservation Society. They held a small ceremony in the back hall, 20 folding chairs, a folding table with iced tea and lemon cookies. I had told my parents the date and time 3 times in 3 formats. My grandmother had been dead for 4 years. My father, Robert Hollister, didn't come. He'd sent a text that morning. Deposition ran long. Proud of you. My mother, Diane Hollister, arrived 23 minutes before it ended. She wore a navy linen dress and tortoiseshell earrings. She held her champagne flute against her collarbone as if it were a brooch. She kissed the air beside my cheek. She looked at the certificate on the wall. She said, "So when do you start applying to real jobs, Mags?" Master Worsham was 3 feet away. He didn't turn his head. He stirred his iced tea with a small wooden swizzle stick I had carved for him that morning. The cubes ticked against the glass. I didn't answer my mother that night. I drove home alone. I opened the canvas tool roll my grandmother had given me at her last Thanksgiving, and I saw the small folded square of paper tucked into the chisel pocket, the one I'd noticed every time I unrolled it for 4 years, the one I had never opened. I wasn't ready to read whatever Grandma had left in there. I put the roll on the top shelf of my workshop closet and didn't touch it for 7 years. In November of 2018, in room 4B at Roper Hospital, my grandmother could not speak above a whisper. She wrote on a yellow legal pad my mother had brought her. Her hand shook so badly, the letters bunched at the end of each line like flotsam against a seawall. I sat in the chair beside the bed and held the pad steady for her. She wrote, "The file with George Llewellyn, my dear, dated 1998. For you, only you. I read it twice. I didn't know who George Llewellyn was." My mother came in with 2 paper cups of coffee. She set them on the windowsill. She bent over the pad. She read it. She tore the page off the legal pad in one smooth motion, folded it twice, and slipped it into the pocket of her cardigan. "Mom's just confused, sweetie. Don't take it too seriously." She kissed Grandma's forehead. Let her rest. I asked Diane about the paper 3 months later, after the funeral. She told me she'd thrown it out because it was upsetting me. I was 21. I had no reason not to believe my mother. I believed her for 6 years and 4 months. The tradition in my family is that Easter dinner happens at 4 p.m. sharp at the Hollister House on Trad Street. The table set for 14, the silver polished, the deviled eggs prepared by my father's longtime housekeeper, Miss Eunice. My father carves. My mother weeps once, briefly, into her napkin while toasting absent relatives. The weeping is not theatrical. It is liturgical. It happens every year. Easter 2024, she wept twice. The second time was after dessert. The table had been cleared down to the candlesticks. Tyler sat to my father's right. I sat in the doorway seat where I could see the walnut sideboard I had refinished in 2020. The sideboard still held its rich, black cherry tint. The light fell across it the way I had planned. My mother set her dessert fork down. She looked at the ceiling. She said, "I don't know what we're going to do, Maggie. Your brother. He's worked so hard, sweetheart. I can't ask, but—" She did not finish the sentence. She did not have to. Tyler stared at his plate. He was 22. His Vanderbilt Law conditional acceptance had arrived in February. He had not yet learned to perform humility, so he overshot it. He sat very still and looked sad. My father chewed slowly, 3 measured chews per bite, and nodded with the chewing. I cut my mother off before she could finish the sentence she didn't intend to finish. "How much do you need?" She looked at me as if I'd presented her with a gift she'd forgotten she'd asked for. "Oh, honey." She covered my hand with hers. "Are you sure?" A week later, my father proposed the mechanism. We met at the Ayanka Bank branch on Calhoun Street. The personal banker was a young woman named Haley who had a small framed photo of a basset hound on her desk. "It's safer this way," Robert said. "Joint account. Tax simpler. You don't have to worry about it, sweetheart. I'll handle everything." I signed 3 signature cards. I did not read them carefully. The account number was 5417. The opening deposit was $100,000, word from my Wells Fargo personal account, every dollar I'd saved in 8 years of working 2 jobs while apprenticing. On the drive home, I called Bev Llewellyn, the only person besides my grandmother I had ever told the truth about money to. Beverly Llewellyn was 66, retired textile curator at the Charleston Museum, an old friend of Master Worsham's. We'd had tea together once a month for 2 years. I told Bev about the transfer. I told her about Tyler. I told her my parents had been kind. There was a silence on the line. 4 seconds, maybe 5. "Margaret." Bev rarely used my full name. "Did your father say which account he's holding it in?" I said I didn't remember. She didn't say anything for another long moment. "Drive safe, dear," she said. "Call me Tuesday." I called her Tuesday. She talked about the weather. I let her. 2 weeks after Easter, Tyler posted his Vanderbilt Law Tour to Instagram. 4 photographs: the campus quad, an old library, a stained glass window, a stone bench. Caption: "Off to start the dream. Hollisters work for what they have. #blessed." I liked it within 30 seconds. I commented, "So proud, little brother." My mother shared the post to Facebook with a different caption. Tyler earned every penny. Hollister's work for what they have. She did not tag me. She did not need to. I should have asked which account. I didn't. 16 months passed before the bank statement appeared. September 8th, 2025, a Monday, around 9:30 in the morning. I'd driven to Trad Street to pick up a second canvas tool roll my mother had said she'd found while cleaning out my grandmother's old steamer trunk in the attic. The kind of errand that took 15 minutes in a normal week. I let myself in the kitchen door. The coffee was on, the newspaper was folded on the breakfast bar, the crossword half finished in my father's handwriting. He was somewhere in the back of the house. I poured myself a cup of coffee. The bank statement was lying face down on the kitchen counter. Inca Bank, the green corner logo visible through the back of the paper. The corner of a coaster had slipped under the edge. I moved the coaster. I turned the statement over without thinking. The first thing I saw was a red transaction line 3 rows down. Transfer out. Vanderbilt Bursar's office. $98,400. August 15th, 2024. I read the date 3 times before I read the amount. The kitchen door opened. My father walked in carrying the New York Times magazine. He saw the statement. He saw my hand on it. He didn't break stride. He picked up the coffee pot, refilled my mug to the top, and set the mug down on the corner of the statement like a coaster. "Don't drink it too fast, sweetheart," he said. "You'll burn your tongue." He kissed the top of my head. He left the room. I drove away from Trad Street and did not get further than the corner of Broad and Logan before I pulled my Honda Civic to the curb. I sat in the driver's seat with the engine running. I did not cry. I took off my left shoe and set it on the passenger seat. I sat in one shoe for a while. I put the shoe back on. 47 minutes. The clock on the dash said 9:47 when I pulled over. It said 10:34 when I pulled back out. I drove to my workshop on Spring Street. I locked the door behind me. I sat in the Aikenret chair that was clamped in the bench vise, waiting for its final glue to set. The chair was a 1798 Charleston sideboard chair, mahogany with original carved shells on the cresting rail. It was the most valuable object I had ever been allowed to touch. I sat in the chair as if it were a pew. I had 3 options. None of them was loud. I opened the search bar on my phone and typed Charleston estate attorney specializing in trust breach. I did not hit send. I closed the app. Not yet. I did nothing for 2 months. I went to Thanksgiving. I ate the turkey. I laughed at my father's joke about the workshop being the shed, bless her heart. It was the 8th time he'd used that phrase that year. The guests at the table laughed politely. I laughed politely. Tyler raised his glass to his Vanderbilt Law top 10% GPA. I clinked his glass. He grinned, all bright Hollister teeth. That night, my mother posted a photograph to Facebook. The walnut frame I had restored for my father in 2021, restored from a piece of butter-grade lumber into something with cathedral-figured grain that I had hand-rubbed for 11 hours. That frame now held an 8x10 of Tyler in his Vanderbilt windbreaker. Caption, "My whole heart in one frame." I liked the post within an hour. On the drive back to my apartment at Vendu Range, my phone buzzed with a text from Bev. "Drive safe, dear." And Mags. "Call me tomorrow. There's something I should have told you 18 months ago." I did not call her tomorrow. I opened the tool roll first. I sat on the edge of my bed in the apartment with the tool roll across my knees, and I unfolded the small square of paper I had not opened in 7 years. It was a single sheet. My grandmother's hand. November 14th, 2018. My dear Maggie, the file with George Llewellyn, dated 1998. Promise me you will not read it until you need it. You will know when. Love, Grandma Grace. The kettle whistled in the kitchen. I had put it on, I realized, when I'd come in from the car. It whistled twice, then a third time. I did not get up. I sat for 11 minutes. I am the daughter of people who taught me that good breeding means you do not make noise. I sat without making noise. I searched George Llewellyn on my phone. The first result was an obituary. George Llewellyn, founder of Llewellyn and Holcomb Estate Law, passed peacefully in 2020, survived by his daughter and successor, Hattie Llewellyn, who continues the practice from the firm's office on Broad Street. I closed the phone. I went into the kitchen. I turned off the kettle. I did not yet know what I was going to do. But my grandmother had told me I would know when. December 5th, 2025. Bev Llewellyn came to the workshop for the first time. She brought Earl Grey in a small enameled kettle and a tin of shortbread. She wore a wool coat the color of dried sage. She did not mention my parents. She walked the perimeter of the workshop with her hands folded behind her back. She paused at a small mahogany chest I had been finishing for a private client. She bent down. She looked at the dovetails. "Who taught you this, Margaret? It isn't the Roy Underhill way. It's older." I told her my grandmother had shown me a chair once. Bev did not ask another question. She straightened up. She poured the Earl Grey into 2 mugs. She handed one to me. We drank standing up. After a while, she said, "Your grandmother once told me, Beverly, the work is the signature. You don't need your name on it." I disagreed with her. She laughed. She set her mug down. "My daughter Hattie's been wanting to meet you. She handles estates. Ring her when you're ready." She buttoned her coat at the door. She paused. She said, "There's no rush, dear. The wood is patient." I waited 5 weeks. In the meantime, the Aiken-Rhett house director, Margaret Sutton, brought me a private commission. 6 dining chairs and a sideboard from the Antebellum collection. $240,000. The board had approved me unanimously. They signed the NDA. I signed the NDA. I told no one in my family. Each morning at 6, I unlocked the workshop. I worked until the noon light slanted through the east window. I drank coffee. I ate a peanut butter sandwich at my bench. I went back to work. Every evening, I drafted an email to Hattie Llewellyn. Every evening, I saved the draft and did not send. I needed one more piece. I did not know what it was. On January 9th, 2026, I returned to the Trad Street kitchen to retrieve an empty tin of bench wax I'd left under the sink. The house was warm. My mother was at her bridge club. My father was on the phone in the back bedroom. I could hear his voice through the floorboards. "The firm audit, yes. We have to be careful with the timing. We've got cushion through May, maybe June. After that." I do not remember what I did with the wax tin. I photographed 4 bank statements on the kitchen counter that I had not been meant to see. October, November, December, January 5417 account. All in my name and my father's, all with steady withdrawals. I drove home. I sat at my kitchen table. I texted Hattie Llewellyn for the first time. "I'm Bev's friend. I need to come in. I have a file from 1998. She wrote back in 4 minutes. "Tuesday at 10. Broad Street. Bring the file." I did not have the file. I needed the file. I drove back to Trad Street the following morning at the only time of day. My father swam laps at the yacht club. I went through his desk in the study. I found the file in the bottom drawer under a stack of duck hunting permits. It was labeled Grace Hollister. 1998. Trust. I photographed every page. I put the file back. I drove away. Hattie Llewellyn was 32. My age, exactly. She wore round tortoiseshell glasses and a cardigan the color of fresh wheat. Her office above the bookbinders on Broad Street smelled faintly of pipe tobacco that had been in the walls since her father's time. She did not stand when I came in. She gestured at the chair. She read the photographs on my phone. She did not say anything for 2 full minutes. She put the phone down. She said, "Margaret, Your grandmother set up this trust in June of 1998 when you were 1 year old. The corpus was $100,000. The trustee was your father. The beneficiary, sole and exclusive, was you. The trust contained a no commingling clause. He breached it in August of 2024. She turned to her keyboard. She began typing. We file a petition for breach of fiduciary duty in Charleston County Probate Court. We attach a request for the immediate restoration of the corpus plus statutory interest. We file a notarized lien on the Trad Street property as security. We file a cease and desist on your father personally so he cannot move further assets. The filing takes 6 weeks to process. We file in March. The court calendar means the matter is fully recorded before the Vanderbilt Law graduation on April 24th. She stopped typing. Who can witness? I told her about Eli Pinckney. 66 years old, the ANCA Bank Trust officer who had set up the original 1998 trust with my grandmother. Still at the bank, still in possession of the original corporate file copies. She nodded once. Then we have everything. I stood up, my legs were steady. She said, Margaret, one more thing. Don't tell your brother. Don't tell your parents. Don't change anything in your routine. The instrument works only because they do not see it coming. I nodded, she said, and don't smile too much. They'll feel it. I did not smile. The week after I met Hattie Llewellyn, Bev called. St. Philip's Heritage Committee has bumped you off the 2026 holiday craft market. Mrs. Pruitt said, Diane mentioned concerns about your mental state, dear. I've been quietly correcting where I can. It's the Junior League and the Garden Club, too, and 2 trustees at the museum. I asked Bev how far it had gone. She said, far enough that Mrs. Sutton at Aiken Rhett asked me last week if everything was all right at home. I told her it was fine. I lied to her, Margaret, for you, because you'd asked me to. I won't do it again. I told Bev I was sorry. She said, don't be sorry. Be ready. Pause for a second. If you've ever sat at a holiday table while someone rewrote your life out loud to everyone who mattered, and you smiled because that's what you'd been raised to do, would you have stayed quiet until you could speak with paperwork, or would you have lit the room on fire and walked out? Tell me in the comments. There's no wrong answer. I'm asking because I lay awake for many nights asking myself. February 14th, 2026, Valentine's Day. I drove to Trad Street to drop off a card for my mother. It was the kind of empty errand I was using to keep my routine identical. I came in through the front door. The walnut frame I had restored in 2021 was in the foyer, hanging where every guest passed it on their way to the living room. It now held a glossy print of a forged Vanderbilt Law Scholarship certificate, a certificate Tyler had never received, a certificate his merit-based conditional letter had been digitally altered into. The frame was glossed with a gold paper seal. Across the bottom of the matting, my mother had had it lettered in foil. Tyler Hollister earned every penny. Vanderbilt Law, 2026. My mother came up behind me on her stockinged feet. Isn't it beautiful? Her hand rested on my upper arm. Your father had it printed last month. I told him it deserved a real frame. That walnut piece you did for him in 2021. So lovely it found its purpose, didn't it, sweetheart? I told her it was beautiful. I left her card on the foyer table. I walked back to my car. I took my phone out. I photographed the frame through the front window. Then I drove to the workshop and forwarded the photograph to Hattie. She wrote back, save it, timestamp it, we may use it. On February 27th, my brother accidentally sent me a text he had meant for our mother. I was at the workshop. The Aiken Rhett chair was on the bench. I read the text twice. Mom, Dad says we have to keep Mags out of grad weekend. The firm audit is too close. Can we just say closest family? She'll get over it. He realized within 30 seconds. Ignore that. Wrong window. I stood at the bench with my phone in my left hand and the chisel in my right hand. I did not put either down. I screenshotted the text. I forwarded it to Hattie. I waited for the typing dots. 8 minutes. She wrote, "Save it. Timestamp it. We're a month out. I wrote my brother back." "No worries, Ty. See you in April." He sent a thumbs up. On February 21st, 6 days earlier, I had stood in the marble hallway of the South Battery Hall at a St. Cecilia Society reception, where I was a guest of Bev Llewellyn because the Hollisters were not members and never had been. My mother had seen me across the room. Her face had hardened. My father had stood up and gone into the hallway with his phone. I had excused myself to find the powder room. I had paused behind a marble column because his back was to me, and his voice was rising. "Dean Caldwell, I'm calling in 20 years of alumni donations. The $34,000 is just a bridge. Give me to the end of May. Margaret will. Look, she'll understand if it comes to that." He hung up. He stood with his back to me, very still. He took a deep breath. The back of his neck was red. His right hand, the one holding the phone, was shaking. I'd never seen my father's hand shake. I walked past him on my way back to Bev's table. He did not see me. That was the first time I understood. My father was not powerful. He was frightened. I called Hattie from my car in the South Battery parking lot. I told her about the call. I told her about the $34,000. I told her about the firm audit. She was quiet for a moment. She said, "Margaret, your father didn't take the $100,000 just for Tyler. He took it because the firm was bleeding. Tyler was the cover. The Vanderbilt tuition was the pretext." The SC Bar opened a docket on Hollister and Crew trust fund handling in August. He had to make a wire look domestic. Yours did. I asked if we could accelerate. She said, "March 12th. I'll have the lien ready by March 8th. 6 weeks before graduation. Plenty." I drove home. I made pasta. I went to bed at 10. On March 12th, at 9:17 in the morning, Hattie Llewellyn filed a petition for breach of fiduciary duty in Charleston County Probate Court, recorded a notarized lien against the Trad Street property, and hand-delivered a cease and desist letter to my father's law firm. She texted me the timestamp at 9:19. Filed. He has 30 days. He won't move before April 24th. I posted a photograph to Instagram at noon. A dovetail joint on the Aiken Rhett chair. The wood grain was visible. Caption: "The wood remembers." Bev liked it. Hattie liked it. Eli Pinckney liked it. He had followed me 3 days earlier. My mother scrolled past it without comment. For 6 weeks, I did exactly what Hattie had told me to do. I changed nothing. I varnished. I rubbed wax. I drove to Magnolia Cemetery on Sundays and laid camellias on my grandmother's stone. I did not smile too much. The room was getting ready. April 24th, 2026. The morning of Tyler's graduation. 7:14 a.m. I was applying the 4th coat of varnish to the 3rd Aiken Rhett chair when the phone rang on the bench. The screen said Mom. I wiped my brush on the lip of the can. I picked up. My mother's voice came through, sweet and slow and rehearsed. "Maggie, sweetheart, I should have called sooner. Your father and I. Graduation weekend. We just need closest family only this time. You understand. Tyler will be so focused on the ceremony. We'll do something with you next weekend. Okay, darling?" The shorter version was the version in the title of this story. "You're not invited, sweetheart. Closest family only." I said, "I understand, Mom." I hung up. I picked up my brush. My hands did not shake. That surprised me more than the call. 48 minutes later, the workshop door opened. Tyler Hollister stood in the doorway in his Vanderbilt Law graduation gown. Navy. Hood folded across the front. The light from Spring Street caught the gold tassel. He looked around. He breathed in. The workshop smelled of varnish and beeswax and old wood. He wrinkled his nose. He walked over to the bench. He looked at the Aiken Rhett chair. He looked at me. He laughed. "God, Maggie, look at yourself. filthy, broke, wasting your pathetic life on other people's old trash. Varnishing a chair at 8 in the morning? Of course you're not coming. Be reasonable. You'd be miserable. Stuffy lawyers and mom's friends. You'd humiliate us all. He held up his phone. He took a photograph of me and the chair. He typed for a few seconds. He pocketed the phone. He turned at the door. He grinned. Catch you next weekend, sis. He left. I checked Instagram 20 seconds later. The photograph was up. Caption: My sister, the artist, 14,000 followers. The first comment, from a fraternity brother, said, "Bless her heart." It was up for 9 minutes before the likes reached 200. When my brother laughed at me, I felt nothing. That was the moment I knew I'd already won. At 8:23 a.m., I washed my hands. I dried them on a clean shop rag. I picked up my phone. I dialed Hattie Llewellyn. She answered on the second ring. I said, "It's today. They just told me I'm not invited. Bring Eli. Bring Caroline. 8 a.m. at my apartment tomorrow." She said, "Confirmed. We're all set. Eli's bringing the original codicil. Caroline knows to keep it off the record until you say so." The call lasted 4 minutes and 12 seconds. I went back to the chair. I finished the fourth coat. I locked up at noon. I drove to Magnolia Cemetery. I left camellias on my grandmother's stone. I drove home. I made pasta. I slept for 8 hours. Later that afternoon, while I slept, my brother posted a champagne photograph to Instagram. 3 flutes: Tyler, Robert, Diane. The bar at High Cotton on King Street. Caption: Made it. Love you, Mom and Dad. He did not tag me. He did not need to. My mother shared it to Facebook. 73 likes by sunset. Someone in the comments wrote, "So proud of all you Hollisters." They went to sleep believing they had won. I went to sleep knowing they had lost 6 weeks ago. April 25th, 7:48 a.m. My apartment at Vendu Range. The kitchen smelled of Earl Grey. Hattie Llewellyn sat at the head of my kitchen table in a charcoal suit. Bev Llewellyn sat to her right, in the wool coat the color of dried sage, the small enameled kettle on the table in front of her. Eli Pinckney sat to Hattie's left. 66 years old. Charcoal suit, no tie. Reading glasses pushed up onto his forehead. In front of him on the table lay a manila folder, soft at the corners with age. Hollister, G. 1998, original. At the far end of the table sat Caroline Beaumont, 47 Post and Courier features reporter, her recorder face down on the table. My grandmother's canvas tool roll lay beside the manila folder. I had placed it there at 7:34 because I had wanted it there. Bev poured Earl Grey. 3 mugs. The third mug was the one my grandmother had left me. Bev set the third mug in front of me without looking up. She said, "She'd have wanted this kettle to do this work, dear. She would have liked the symmetry." I cradled the mug. I did not drink. At 8:02 a.m., the front door lock turned. My father had been given a spare key in 2022, in case of emergency. My mother walked in first. "Maggie, your father and I think we need to talk about your behavior yester." She saw Eli Pinckney. She stopped. My father walked in behind her. He looked at Eli. He took half a step backward. He said, "Eli." It was the first time my father had said Eli Pinckney's name in 28 years. Hattie stood up. "Mr. Hollister, Mrs. Hollister, please sit down. We've been waiting since 7 a.m. My mother sat down. She did not unbutton her coat. Eli opened the manila folder. He found the page he wanted. He pushed his reading glasses down onto his nose. He read aloud. "This trust, in the amount of $100,000, shall be held in fiduciary trust for the sole benefit of my granddaughter, Margaret Grace Hollister, and shall not be commingled with parental finances under any circumstance. Trustee, Robert Calhoun Hollister. Beneficiary, sole and exclusive, Margaret Grace Hollister. Established June 4th, 1998. Signed, Grace Lillian Hollister." He closed the folder. He looked at my mother. He waited. My mother's silk scarf had slipped from her shoulder onto her lap. She did not adjust it. Hattie slid 3 sheets of paper across the table. One was the petition, file stamped Charleston County Probate Court, March 12, 2026. One was the recorded lien against the Trad Street property, recorded March 13th. One was the cease and desist, served personally to Robert Hollister at his office on March 14th. My father read the dates. He said, "You filed in March." His voice cracked on the second word. Caroline Beaumont put her index finger on the recorder. "Mr. Hollister, would you like to comment on the SC bar audit for tomorrow's piece? I can quote you, or paraphrase. Your call." My father did not answer. My mother finally spoke. "This is between family. The press is. Margaret, you brought a reporter into our family business." Hattie did not look at her. "Mrs. Hollister, this stopped being family business when your husband breached fiduciary duty. It's a court matter now." I spoke for the first time in the scene. I said, "I want my $100,000 back, with statutory interest by Friday. The lien stays on Trad Street until it's paid, or you sell Sullivan's Island. Robert, Diane, choose." I had never in 29 years called my parents by their first names to their faces. It was as if I had taken something off their shoulders and put it on the table between us. A name. A claim. A coat they were no longer entitled to wear inside my house. My mother flinched. My father did not lift his head. I stood up. I picked up the third mug. I walked to the window. The wisteria was heavy on the courtyard fence below. Behind me, I heard Bev stand up. She said, "Robert, Diane, I'll walk you out." The chairs scraped. My mother's heel left a small dark scuff on my heart pine floor. The door closed. The kitchen was silent. The kettle had gone cold. I stayed at the window for a long time. 3 weeks later, on May 16th, 2026, at the Charleston Heritage Awards at Dock Street Theater, the Aiken Rhett House sideboard chair was hoisted onto a black cloth platform on the stage. The audience was 286 people. Mrs. Pruitt of St. Philip's was in row 4. The Junior League president was in row 5. 3 trustees of the Charleston Museum were in row 2. Caroline Beaumont was in the press section. Tyler Hollister sat in row 8 on the aisle, alone. He had insisted on attending. He had paid his own ticket. Robert and Diane Hollister did not attend. Caroline Beaumont had emailed them a formal media invitation 11 days earlier. The invitation had been opened and not answered. In the green room, Bev poured Earl Grey into the third mug. She handed it to me. She said, "You can shake on the way out, not on the way to the mic. The work is the signature, baby." I drank. Mrs. Margaret Sutton of the Aiken Rhett House mounted the podium. She announced the $240,000 acquisition by the Charleston Museum of the restored sideboard collection. She announced my appointment as consulting curator for 19th century furniture. She did not name my family. She did not need to. When she said the words, Margaret Hollister, Tyler stood up and walked out of the theater. The applause did not stop for him. I walked to the microphone. I stood for 4 seconds. I did not look at the chair behind me. I said, "My name is Margaret Hollister. I restore what others throw away. I learned this craft from my grandmother Grace, who is buried at Magnolia Cemetery. The work speaks. It always has." I stepped down. The applause lasted 47 seconds. Mrs. Sutton, 78, Aiken Rhett volunteer, stood up first. At the reception, Mrs. Sutton found me near the bar cart. She put both her hands on mine. She did not let go. She said, "Your grandmother would have stood up at the back of the room and clapped." I did not answer. I held her hands for 4 seconds. A single tear came down my left cheek. I wiped it with my ring finger. No sound. No more. That was all. If you've ever stood in a room where the people who taught you were nothing finally saw what you were, would you have said something longer? Would you have wanted to? Drop the answer below. Margaret Hollister, or shorter, or none at all. I'm curious whether other quiet daughters speak the way I did, or whether you'd have made the mic ring. The Post and Courier ran Caroline Beaumont's piece on May 17th on the front page of the features section. 4 pages. Headline: Hollister returns the chair. Charleston nearly lost. The full-page photograph was a close-up of my hand on the cresting rail of the sideboard chair. My face was not in the photograph. The story mentioned the S.C.Bar audit on Hollister and crew. It was the first public mention. On June 3rd, the Vanderbilt Law Career Services Office quietly rescinded Tyler's summer associate offer with Hollister and crew due to conflict of interest disclosure in the audit. Tyler emailed me. I did not reply. He came to the workshop twice that week. I did not open the door. On June 22nd, the state newspaper published a half-column notice that the Hollister parcel on Sullivan's Island had been sold for $124,000 to a private buyer. The lien against Trad Street was released on June 24th. The principal had been recovered. The statutory interest had been paid. The legal fees had been covered. The Sullivan's Island lot had been in the family for 61 years. In early July, my mother called Beverly Llewellyn. She did not call me. She asked Bev to speak to Margaret about whether the Hollister name might be permitted to appear on the donor plaque at the Charleston Museum because her husband's firm needed reputation recovery. Bev called me. She told me what my mother had asked. I told Bev, "Tell her the Hollister name on that plaque belongs to the woman who taught me wood grain, not to her." Bev did not write it down. She did not need to. She told my mother. My mother did not call again. On the morning of July 14th, 2026, I drove to the workshop on Spring Street before the city was awake. The workshop smelled of beeswax and lemon oil and old turpentine. The dawn light came in, warm through the east window. A single amber bar across the floorboards. The walnut grain ran under my hands. The small brass plaque Bev had ordered for the door was screwed into place beside the lock. Hollister Restoration, established 2017 by Margaret Grace Hollister. The Aiken-Rhett chair had been replaced on my bench by a new commission. A walnut sideboard from a private collection in Mount Pleasant. The board was rough, unfinished, 3 feet long, the color of weak coffee. I made coffee. I sat down at the bench. I put my hand on the board. I closed my eyes. I felt which way the tree wanted to grow. My father had called this place a shed for 7 years. I am 29. I call it my shed now. The wood remembers. So do I.